The afternoon air turns thick and unsettlingly quiet, holding the heavy metallic scent of ozone. Look closely at the suburban canopy, and you will notice an eerie, sudden vacancy. The feeders hang motionless, and the usual chaotic symphony of chirps has vanished completely. Where a thriving community of blue jays and chickadees bustled moments ago, there is now only an empty waiting stage. This is not a random coincidence or a simple retreat from the coming rain. It is a highly coordinated, mathematically precise evacuation executed by creatures that possess a sensory apparatus far superior to our own advanced meteorological instruments. Long before our digital screens flash bright red weather warnings, the avian mind has already processed the invisible shifting of the world and made its definitive tactical decision. To understand this sudden disappearance, we must look at the sharp, calculated gaze of a glossy black crow perched on a frost-covered power line, analyzing every subtle vibration in the atmosphere. These urban survivors do not experience a storm as a visual spectacle of dark clouds. They read it as a crushing drop in barometric pressure that resonates directly within their specialized anatomy. Inside the avian middle ear lies a microscopic, fluid-filled cavity known as the Vitali organ, a biological barometer capable of detecting the most minute fluctuations in weight across the air columns. As the atmospheric pressure plummets, the fluid shifts, triggering a cascade of neural signals that flood the avian brain with an urgent, undeniable directive. It is a sensory awakening that transforms the familiar backyard into a map of invisible, descending walls. While humans rely on satellite arrays and radar sweeps, a flock of migrating sparrows relies on the deep, low-frequency rumble of infrasound, traveling thousands of miles ahead of the storm front. This deep acoustic signature, vibrating far below the threshold of human hearing, bounces off distant mountain ranges and crashes through the upper atmosphere, filling the avian inner ear with a precise geometric map of the approaching danger. The subtle, rhythmic clicks echoing through a dense morning fog as a flock coordinates its movements are actually complex data transmissions, sharing real-time aerodynamic updates. Each individual processes this infrasonic data, calculating the exact speed, velocity, and thermal mass of the tempest long before the first raindrop hits a single oak leaf. The response to this data is a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering and cognitive calculation, not a panic-driven flight. For a smaller bird, like a goldfinch with a fragile skeletal frame, staying exposed during a high-velocity wind event means certain death from impact or profound hypothermia. The tiny creature must rapidly calculate its metabolic budget, balancing the caloric cost of hiding against the immediate need to gorge on high-fat seeds before the freeze sets in. Watch them feed with frantic, hyper-accelerated precision just hours before the storm, their keen eyes measuring the distance to the nearest dense thicket of thorny briars or the hollow interior of a rotted pine trunk. They are mapping out their survival grid, identifying micro-refugium where the swirling winds cannot penetrate. These micro-refugii are the hidden fortresses of the suburban landscape, found inside the deep, intertwined branches of an old-growth ivy vine, clinging to a brick chimney, or within the sheltered cavities of an abandoned woodpecker nest. Once inside these architectural sanctuaries, birds enter a state of hypervigilance, adjusting their perching posture to lock their specialized digital tendons securely around a twig, ensuring they cannot be dislodged even if the branch whips violently in 60-mile-per-hour gusts. Their feathers, zipped together by thousands of microscopic barbules, form a waterproof, wind-resistant shield that traps a layer of warm air directly against their skin. In this quiet, claustrophobic darkness, they wait out the chaos, their heart rates dropping to conserve precious energy while their minds remain acutely attuned to the shifting pressures outside. Larger corvids approach the atmospheric crisis with a completely different level of intellectual strategy. A solitary raven does not merely hide. It utilizes the turbulent updrafts of the advancing storm front to scout the changing landscape, riding the violent thermal currents with terrifying grace. Its large, complex brain, packed with a high density of telencephalic neurons, allows it to predict how the storm will disrupt human activity and uncover new foraging opportunities. The raven understands that high winds overturn trash receptacles, expose hidden rodent tunnels, and break dead tree limbs, creating an immediate post-storm feast. It watches the human world retreat indoors, cataloging the sudden lack of movement below, waiting for the precise moment when the apex predator of the suburbs leaves the environment completely unguarded. This behavioral shift challenges the old orthodox views that treat animals as simple, reactive automatons driven purely by blind instinct. The avian response to a natural disaster is an active process of risk assessment, memory retrieval, and spatial reasoning. When a storm approaches, a bird must access its episodic memory, a mental time travel machine that allows it to replay past environmental crises frame by frame, recalling exactly which structures held up and which areas became deadly wind tunnels. It compares the current barometric drop with the memories of previous seasons, deciding whether to stay and defend its territory or abandon the area entirely for safer ground miles away. This is high-level cognitive processing happening inside a brain the size of a single walnut. To prove this extraordinary cognitive adaptability, field researchers have monitored the neurological activity of wildflocks during simulated weather anomalies. Using microscopic telemetry tags, scientists tracked how white-throated sparrows responded to artificial drops in local air pressure inside controlled outdoor aviaries. The data revealed that the birds did not display random fear. Instead, they immediately altered their social hierarchies, allowing the most experienced elders to lead the flock toward the safest feeding zones. The younger, less experienced birds watched these veterans intently, copying their foraging techniques and learning the specific acoustic signatures of safe shelter. This demonstrates a sophisticated system of cultural transmission, where vital survival data is passed down through generations of urban wildlife. The true mystery deepens when we observe how different species interact and communicate as the sky darkens into a deep, bruised purple. The backyard becomes a theater of cross-species cooperation, where the alarm calls of a single tufted titmouse can alter the behavior of an entire ecosystem. These specific vocalizations, sharp and high-pitched, carry a distinct acoustic frequency that cuts directly through the gathering wind, warning every listening creature that the window for safe foraging is rapidly closing. Nuthatches, woodpeckers, and brown thrashers all interpret this universal distress beacon, immediately abandoning their territorial disputes to converge on their remaining food sources in a tense, silent truce before the final retreat. As the first heavy drops of rain splatter against the dry, cracked soil of the garden path, the disappearance is absolute. The suburban landscape feels completely abandoned, transformed into a stark, silent, monochrome world of swaying branches and gray light. Yet just beneath the surface, inside the hollows, the thickets, and the architectural crevices of our own homes, thousands of brilliant, hyper-aware minds are actively tracking the tempest. They are counting the seconds between the thunderclaps, measuring the weight of the air, and waiting for the exact moment the pressure stabilizes to reclaim their kingdom. When the fury of the storm finally breaks, unleashing torrential sheets of water against the glass panes of human dwellings, the silence in the canopy deepens into a profound, calculated stasis. This is the crucible of the avian winter, a period where the boundary between survival and oblivion is measured in fractions of a millimeter of downy insulation and the precise management of internal glycogen stores. Inside the deep, hollowed-out trunk of a centuries-old white oak, 6 blue jays sit packed tightly together in a motionless, radiating circle of feathers. All territorial aggression, a defining trait of their waking lives, is completely suspended. Their large, highly developed forebrains have overwritten the daily drive for dominance, prioritizing collective thermoregulation over individual status. This temporary truce is a striking manifestation of cognitive flexibility under extreme environmental stress. The avian brain does not simply freeze in fear. It downregulates non-essential metabolic processes while keeping the sensory cortex running at maximum capacity. Through a physiological process known as nocturnal torpor, smaller songbirds like the black-capped chickadee can intentionally lower their core body temperature by several degrees, dropping their metabolic rate to a fraction of its normal daytime level. As they sit huddled beneath the thick, peeling bark of a dead river birch, Their tiny hearts slow from a frantic 1,000 beats per minute down to a measured, deliberate pulse. Every breath is a calculated expenditure, a precise rationing of the fat reserves harvested during those hyper-accelerated feeding bouts, just hours before the front arrived. While the smaller passerines rely on physiological deceleration, the urban crows resting on the sheltered underbelly of a massive concrete highway overpass engage in a form of collective vigilance that resembles a military command center. From this dry, elevated vantage point, their keen black eyes track the shifting dynamics of the flooded streets below, mapping the chaotic movements of human emergency vehicles and the path of rising waters. Corvids possess an extraordinary spatial awareness that allows them to predict how the physical geometry of the city will alter after a disaster. They know that a fallen maple tree across a power line will inevitably draw human work crews, whose heavy machinery will churn up the saturated earth, exposing an abundance of earthworms and displaced grubs. This capacity for forward planning relies on the expansion of the nidipallium caudalateral, the avian equivalent of the human prefrontal cortex, which governs executive function, decision-making, and the abstract representation of time. When a crow looks out at a blinding sheet of rain, it is not merely experiencing the present moment, it is running mental simulations of the immediate future based on decades of accumulated cultural knowledge. Older individuals within the roost, some having survived multiple historic weather events, exhibit a remarkable calm that directly influences the behavior of the juveniles around them. The young birds mimic the resting postures of the elders, suppressing the urge to panic or fly into the treacherous air currents, learning through silent observation how to endure the invisible weight of the atmosphere. As the eye of the storm passes and the barometric pressure begins its steep, upward climb, the fluid within the Vitali organ shifts once more, sending a wave of electrical impulses through the vestibulocochlear nerve. This is the physiological green light, the silent whistle that signals the end of the evacuation. The transition from total immobility to frantic activity is nearly instantaneous. Before the heavy gray clouds have even parted to reveal the pale afternoon sun, the first tentative, metallic notes of a northern cardinal cut through the dripping silence of the garden. This initial vocalization is not a song of celebration, but a critical diagnostic probe sent out to map the post-storm reality. It is an acoustic ping, checking to see who has survived the night and which territories have been left vacant by the wind. Within minutes, the backyard transforms into a hyperactive zone of rapid reassessment and intense resource exploitation. The chickadees and nuthatches explode from their hidden fortresses, their bodies burning through the last remnants of their fat stores as they race to find immediate sustenance. Watch a downy woodpecker strike its heavy, chiseled beak against the sodden bark of a fallen pine branch, its movements precise and relentless. The bird is capitalizing on a fleeting biological window where the wood is soft and the hidden wood-boring beetles are sluggish from the sudden cold. Every strike of its beak is a desperate race against its own crashing blood sugar, a calculated physical investment that must yield a high caloric return within minutes of emergence. The corvids, meanwhile, execute their post-storm foraging strategies with a chilling, calculated efficiency. A breeding pair of crows descends upon a flooded drainage ditch, their heavy, slate-gray feet splashing through the murky water as they systematically flip over waterlogged leaves and urban debris. They are not hunting by random chance. They are targeting the specific microhabitats where displaced insects and stunned amphibians are trapped by the receding currents. If one crow discovers a particularly rich cache of food, it will frequently look around to check if it is being watched by its neighbors before quickly concealing the prize beneath a piece of torn asphalt or a clump of damp moss. This act of tactical deception proves they understand the hidden motives of their peers, demonstrating a theory of mind once thought unique to the higher primates. This post-storm landscape also reveals the darker, more competitive edge of avian intelligence, where the structural damage caused by the wind creates a high-stakes real estate market. The destruction of an old cavity-bearing tree can instantly displace dozens of nesting pairs, sparking intense, calculated conflicts over the remaining intact hollows. A pair of house wrens will carefully inspect a cracked birdhouse, their heads tilting at sharp angles as they analyze the structural integrity of the roof and the diameter of the entrance hole. They are measuring defensive capability against future weather anomalies, selecting only the fortresses that can withstand the next inevitable drop in barometric pressure. When we look out at our backyards in the peaceful golden light that follows a massive tempest, it is easy to assume that the natural world has simply reset, returning to a state of mindless harmony. But the creatures moving through the wet grass and singing from the high wires are fundamentally changed. They have tested their cognitive architecture against the raw, indifferent power of the atmosphere and emerged victorious. The ordinary songbird is not a fragile ornament of our gardens, but a sophisticated, deeply analytical intelligence that reads the invisible forces of our planet with a clarity we can only replicate with millions of dollars of digital technology. The next time you notice a sudden, inexplicable silence in the trees and feel the air turn heavy and cold, do not look to the television screen for answers. Look instead to the empty feeders, the motionless thickets, and the hidden architecture of the suburban canopy. The birds have not vanished into thin air. They have simply stepped inside their secret fortresses, utilizing millions of years of neurological evolution to outmaneuver the storm. They are waiting in the dark, watching the human world from the shadows and quietly planning their return to a world we foolishly believe belongs only to us.